Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast has evolved over the 5+ years since it first launched. From now on, I'm going to be talking about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. And also mindset, of course, but mindset of all kinds, not just business mindset. I think. Things are changing for me, as you may have noticed if you've been following me online or listening to this podcast, so anything goes here. I hope you stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today, and now let's get into this week's episode. Hi, Joanna.
Hi, Holly.
I'm super excited that we're back for another podcast episode.
It's been a while, I think.
It has. I've missed you, even though I've been in touch with you. We've just not been podcasting.
Indeed.
So today we're talking about how to get past your addiction to busyness. And we're both kind of coming from very different places on this. Joanna is further down the journey than I am, so I think this is going to be a really useful and juicy conversation, because I think that a lot of people who listen to this are probably addicted to business, even if they think they're not, as Joanna has just told me I am, even though I think I'm not.
But I think like it's important to note that we probably all, maybe most, but I'm going to say all because it sounds stronger. We all have the same starting point. And I think we all start with being addicted to busyness and glorifying busyness and all this stuff because of the way we're brought up and because of the last, the most recent stage of human history. It was what it was. And hard work was really, really important. And busyness was attached to hard work. And so, we kind of grew up with a lot of these ideas. So it's not something that's just relevant for a few of us. I think most of us struggle with this or have struggled with this, or like it's somehow it's like all pervasive, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. So what is addiction to business?
Well, I think that it's an unwillingness to be non-busy.
To be still, to be quiet.
Or to just be not busy. Like, I went to an event in London recently and I saw Denise Duffield-Thomas speak about some things that she writes about in her fantastic book, Chillpreneur. I'll put in a plug for it here because I thought I've started reading it now and I think it's really, really great. But one of the things she says in her introduction is that she's an unbusy mom of 3. And she said she did that intentionally because whenever women are portrayed in the press or whatever, like anywhere, if they're being a mother is mentioned, it's mentioned as a busy mom of 3 or a busy mom of 2. And so she wanted to make a point of her being unbusy. She doesn't want to identify with being a busy mom. And I thought that was really cool because it's a thing that we tend to assume and that people assume about us, right? And I know that Denise, for example, and I think this is really great, just consciously says, like, if somebody says to her, oh, I know you're really busy, so something, she'll say, I'm not. Just consciously, like, unstick yourself.
Yeah.
That busyness and be willing to be something else. Doesn't mean you're still, but it just means that you're not, like, hurrying all the time.
And I hate hurrying all the time. And you know that I've come from a decade ago with my first business being, overworked, super busy, burnt out. And I think that's where I really solidified this addiction to business, because my business partner was a workaholic, was always portraying the image of someone who worked even harder than he actually did. It was like we weren't allowed to say when we were taking a day off or an afternoon off or, doing something else. We always had to portray that image of working even harder than we worked, which was pretty hard. I came from that cultural tradition of being addicted to business, but that decade of my life really solidified it for me. And I feel like I've spent the last 11 years really trying to unpick that.
So do you think hard work is the same as busyness, though?
No, I don't.
No, right?
No.
I know loads of people who are super busy, but I mean, they're not actually like creating anything of any value.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's something different as well, I suppose. I mean, staying busy is just using your time to do stuff.
Yeah. And perhaps using your time to do stuff in an inefficient way.
Yeah, sometimes. But I think it's like this glorification of doing,
Yeah.
right? Of producing, of being productive. Like this is like the holy grail of
Yeah.
everything is to do more.
Yeah, exactly.
Smarter and in
Yeah.
better ways, but in effect to produce more, to contribute more. And
Mm.
like I have a lot of clients who really struggle with this piece of not contributing. Like, who
Mm.
are you if you're not producing something? Who are you if you're not contributing to a collective? If you're not like not pulling your weight?
Mm-hmm.
So if you strip all that away and you just stop, if you stop doing, then what do you have left?
You're lazy.
That was a rhetorical question, but we'll go with
I couldn't resist.
yeah.
But
Or
I think it,
lazy, right? Like we're
yeah.
so scared of being judged as
I'm so
lazy.
scared of judging myself as lazy.
Hmm.
And I don't think I am, and I don't think I ever have been lazy, but I'm so afraid of it.
But what if you were lazy? Like lazy is actually, I mean, I'm talking about Denise a lot today.
Yeah.
I'm reading her book and I'm just learning a lot from her at the moment. But lazy is another word that she's reclaiming.
Okay.
So she's she's describing the way she runs her multi-million-dollar business as a little bit lazy, or a lot lazy, in fact. So what's wrong with being lazy?
So to me, has negative connotations. Whereas if you were to say relaxed or chilled, like the title of her book, Chillpreneur, that has positive connotations. But to me, being lazy is someone who is not contributing to society, not working, not being productive, not.
So
I know, but like.
see, but that's just the thing. Like, what's so bad? Like, really, what's so bad about being lazy?
Well, okay, so I think if we go back to like hunter-gatherer times, like we all had to contribute. Like unless you were like ill or had a broken leg, if you were a man you had to hunt, if you were a woman you had to gather, and if you were unwell maybe you had to like herd the children, but like you had to contribute to society. Like
Yeah, because otherwise everybody would die.
Exactly. So maybe that's where this comes from. Maybe this is like ingrained from our ancestors that we have to contribute to society, otherwise we're all going to fall apart.
I think that's one aspect, but like another thing that I think is involved here is the concept of self-worth and identity. Because like I think we tie it together with that, so like if you don't contribute, you're not a worthy person.
You're worthless.
You're worthless.
Yeah.
Because we judge ourselves by how much we get done. This is actually
Yeah.
a conversation I have with clients all the time. Like, and I had a really interesting conversation with one of my clients recently where I was like, if you weren't judging yourself on how much you got done today, what else could you judge your success or well-being by? And she said to me, she's like, I know that this isn't the right answer, but I have to say that I think you're being ridiculous to even suggest that I could judge my success or well-being by anything else than how much I get done.
Wow.
And and it just shows that it's so all pervasive. This is a woman who's like super conscious and super intuitive and super into energy work and like all those things, and she's living her life like judging herself by how much she gets done today.
Yeah.
And we're all doing that in the end.
I do that too. Like when I have a day where I'm like really focused and I get a lot done and I'm like burnt out by the end of the day because I've been like hyper focused for 7 hours, like I feel like I had a good day. I got stuff done. I've reduced the amount of emails in my inbox. I did, other work. I was very productive. And I feel really proud of myself. Whereas if I like went out and like went on a long walk in the forest and like felt amazing, like that's another way to judge success because I, felt amazing, but I don't see that as
right. So you have to train yourself to see that. Now, I mean, this is what we do. So I run a community called the Soul Space. This is what we do. We choose an alignment focus that will help us to feel better, feel more how we want to feel. And actually, you mentioned you feel proud of yourself. One of my Soul Space members recently chose the word proud because she could not even like fathom how she could possibly feel proud of herself until she achieved her next thing, what her current goal is. Wow. Yeah. And that's, and I was like, well, what if you play with being proud of yourself every day?
Mm.
And she was like, clearly I need this, because that just like scares the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And so, so we have to kind of retrain ourselves to choose different markers of success. So we're not judging ourselves by how much we get done. Because honestly, that isn't so important. And, in the grand scheme of things, how many emails you answer today doesn't really matter.
No.
Right? But what matters is that you're living like a life in your fullest potential that's meaningful and purposeful and gratifying.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as I said to you before we started recording, Holly, like, I mean, I don't want to pretend like I have it all sorted, but I do feel like I got past a lot of this stuff. Like in the last 2 years, I've retrained myself to feel good based on other things, or actually to feel good based on nothing at all. To feel good just because I'm me.
And you're alive.
And that's it. Yeah. I'm just me in my life. And at the end of the day, I no longer think about like, okay, I got this stuff done and therefore I had a good day. I just think about that I have a good day. And sometimes that involves getting stuff done and sometimes that it doesn't, And it's been the most liberating thing I've ever done for myself, is to kind of detach from this. And in a way that doesn't mean that I give up on my goals, because I'm still super driven and super goal oriented. Right. But I also at some point noticed that I wasn't enjoying the journey. And as I always say, what's the journey? The journey is your life. Like, why would you not aim to enjoy that?
Yeah, like your life isn't just those moments when you realize you've achieved the goal. It's everything in between achieving the goals or not achieving the goals.
Well, yeah, and in my experience and the experience of, I think, everybody I've ever worked with, when you're that focused on goal achievement as a measure of your worth, then it'll never be enough. As soon as you achieve this goal, you'll be like, yay, I achieved this goal. And then you go on to the next goal. Yeah. And that's it. So you're constantly living your life in I don't measure up mode because I haven't achieved it yet. Like it keeps moving. You basically keep moving the goalposts, right? So today you want to answer emails. Tomorrow you want to write a book. The next day you want to, I don't know, retrain as a nurse. Like whatever those things are.
Yeah, that's not the career for me.
I don't know why that was my example.
I'd be a terrible nurse. No, but I think that's really interesting because I've just been, as we've talked about, like planning, like doing my year-end review, planning my year for next year. And I made my list of like goals. And some of them are goals, like getting my black belt next year. But a lot of them are just stuff that I want to experience, like courses that I'm taking, like going on walks. And I've realized that it's a huge shift because, years before it would have been like, I'm going to write X amount of books and I'm going to like get so many people signed up to my mailing list and so many people, subscribe to my YouTube or whatever. Like it would have been like metric goals. Whereas now it's more like experience goals or like things that I want to make sure I experience.
Yeah. And that's, that's part of the shift, right? Is to let yourself do more of the stuff that you actually enjoy.
Yeah.
But the next step is to let yourself feel awesome and successful and all these things, even if you don't achieve any of the things that you've labeled as goals and you only do the experiences.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the hard bit because we seem to need some kind of measure.
Yeah.
Of self-worth, of contribution. We want to feel like we matter, like we're doing something useful with our time, like we're not wasting.
Yeah.
Right?
So why is addiction to busyness such a problem, do you think?
It's a problem because it makes us feel like crap.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for me.
Yeah.
That for me, that's where the transformation started as well, where I was like, dude, like this is my life. And I'm sitting here, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, like feeling really shitty about myself because I'm not achieving these things. And, and I had to just talk to myself about like why I want to achieve these things, but also like whether I'd be okay if I never achieved these things. And what would happen then? And that's a question that I ask clients all the time as well, because that's something that like the personal development industry almost like hides under the carpet, doesn't want you to ask that question.
Yeah.
But I think it's super important. Like, what are you going to do if you don't achieve your thing? What are you going to do if you don't write your books? Like, what am I going to do if I never move to Ireland? Like, am I going to be miserable for the next 40 years of my life because I didn't achieve that one thing?
Yeah, exactly.
No. When you look at it that way, of course the answer is no.
But some people do. Like, some people don't, have the husband and kids, or don't get the big job, or don't, have these life achievements that they want. And so they use that as an excuse to be miserable.
That's their choice. They're not consciously, and I don't think that's a conscious choice. They're not actually saying, I didn't achieve this and therefore now I choose to be miserable.
Yeah, no.
They think, they don't understand that it is a choice. This is something that's really, really important. I feel a bit silly because I keep mentioning clients today, but I don't find another word for it, and I don't want to mention names, obviously.
Yeah,
but
obviously.
I was working with someone else last week, and my heart literally swelled up when she left me this message. She said, I get it. She said, this undesirable thing happened. So something happened to her. And she's like, and I found myself thinking, I choose not to be miserable about this. I choose to feel something else.
Yeah.
And she's like, I think I finally get it, that it is a choice.
Yeah.
That we can't control the things that happen, but we can always control what we do with that, right?
Yes.
So then if you feel like you're failing at business, you feel really crappy about yourself, right? But you could make a different choice. You could learn to be happier about your life in general, or not base everything on something that results oriented. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of times we also choose busyness to keep our minds occupied, so we don't think about all the shit that we have going on in our lives that makes us unhappy.
Yeah, I've heard so many people say that they're afraid to do introspection stuff because their exact words were things like, I'm afraid of what I'm going to find.
Exactly. But the thing is that stuff is still there affecting you, even though you're not looking at it in the face. It's still kind of got that undercurrent of shit that's crapping on your life.
Yeah. Wow, we're using some great language today.
I know, sorry.
Please don't quote us.
Yeah. These are super profound images. But you know what I mean? I've been there. I've been in a place where my life was really, really dark and bad, and I was choosing not to do anything about it because I was too scared to do anything about it, and that was the best I could do at the time. And I kept myself very, very busy because it was so much easier to stay busy than to look at the crap that I wasn't doing anything about in my life, which was the more important stuff. But I was looking at the less important stuff because that was easier. Yeah,
it's easier. And I've been there too, loads of times. So I totally get it. But it's easier, but it's also valued as more, So for example, I've mentioned my jigsaw puzzles several times on this podcast. I'm going to do that again because I think it's a really, really good example because it's a hobby that takes up relative amount of time to put together a puzzle. My mom once, she was like, how do you have time to do all these puzzles? Shouldn't you be really busy?
Shouldn't you be really busy?
I can't remember what she said.
Yeah, but
she's
still
supposed to be really busy because I have a lot of things on my plate. But for me, it was part of the life that I wanted to create was to have this space to do these puzzles. And I was willing at that time to be okay with people's judgment. That I'm not ambitious enough, or I could be doing more in my work or creating something more, and spending time on something that's valuable.
Yeah. But also when we give ourselves permission to do the puzzle or whatever, that's resting our brain.
Yes, it is. And for a while, my puzzle was the only thing that would rest my brain, actually, because it was the only thing that took up some kind of mental energy so that I wasn't thinking about other things. But we don't want to fall into the trap of making it about some other kind of result either. Just doing it because it's nice, because you enjoy it. Ann Wilson, the wealth chef, she loves to knit or crochet, one of them, I can't remember. But she doesn't need 1,000 scarves, right? So what she does, she goes through a project and she knits something and then she unravels it and uses the wool for something else.
Oh, wow.
I know. And she said it's a really, really good exercise in not being attached to the outcome and in doing something for the pure enjoyment of the process. It's very interesting. Like, who would be willing to do that?
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't have to be just in knitting, but I mean, the puzzle is the same thing, right? Because as soon as I finish the puzzle, I destroy it and take out something else.
Yeah.
So it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
But where else in our lives could we be willing to be that detached from an outcome and just really sink into the process of creating?
Yeah. That'd be like writing a book and then just deleting the file. Ah! That hurt me to even say it.
Right. Not quite there yet, are we?
That is true enlightenment. Yeah, that we're also being...
That seems silly, because that seems silly to yeah.
But it's an extreme example of what you just said. Yeah. Perhaps an extreme example, but yeah.
So for me, like over the years, so when I started my business, I thought like for many years, I thought that my work was about creating more success and manifesting greatness and like all these things. And over the past 2 years or so, I realized that my work, so everything to do with being soul smart, is about, yes, having goals, because like I'm ambitious and driven, and people I work with are also ambitious and driven, but letting yourself enjoy the journey. So not choosing, like, because a lot of people think like if you take your foot off the gas, you're going to just stop.
Yeah.
Nothing will ever get done. Like you won't ever achieve anything. Yeah. And you want to achieve those things, right? You want to write your books. You want to take those walks. You want to run the marathon or whatever it is that you would like to experience. But I think it doesn't have to be an either or. You can have both. And if you consciously choose to, yes, have your goals, but also commit to enjoying every single day of your journey, in my experience, it hasn't hurt my goal achievement at all.
And it's probably improved it. But how did you get to that point where you had that balance between enjoying every single day and still working towards your goals? Like, how did that happen?
Slowly. It happened intentionally. So it happened because I had to unravel success from money at the start. And my business wasn't going anywhere, or it felt like it wasn't going anywhere. But I was committed to it. And I was like, well, I need to have okay days. Like, I can't be crying about this every day. Like, what kind of life is that? You know, like, why am I choosing to be like involved in something that is bringing me so much misery and pain? You know, like, what is that? So I was like, all right, like, do I want to give up the business? No. But I also don't want to be crying about it. So my only choice is to focus on enjoying my days, like on doing the things in my work that feel good, enjoying myself, whether like there are external markers of success or not.
So did you do something to remind yourself of that? Because it's hard to break habits. Like, did you like put up a sign that was like, enjoy the day? Or I don't know.
I mean, not that aggressively. Yeah, so this is the process that we go through in the soul space every single month. So every month, like basically you have your vision of what you want your life to look like. And every month you choose an aspect of that to align with. And so if you're in there, I can remind you, keep people accountable. Otherwise, find ways to keep it front of mind. You can get into the habit of putting it on your daily to-do list. In the soul space, we do vision boards, like collages to kind of encapsulate that energy. You stay committed because you want to stay committed. You have to trick yourself at the start to keep it at the top of your mind, front and center. But eventually, you become really committed to feeling good and feeling the way you want to feel, and it becomes a lot more natural. So when I first started, now it's coming back to me, when I first started, I had a daily practice of saying all my intentions out loud. And so I started my days like by saying how I feel in this new reality that I wanted to step into. And that kept me on track. What it did was because I repeated the same phrases about what described my reality every single day, they got stuck in my head. And then something opposite happened later. I was like, oh, but blah, da, 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 da. But, you know, but ideal clients come to me easily or whatever it was. Or like, oh, I don't know what this is because my bank account expands as if by magic. You know, I wasn't trying. It's just that they were in my head, those phrasings that I wanted to experience in my head. And so that they kept coming back.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
and also I think getting really clear on how you want to feel in your life. Like Danielle Laporte talks about your core desired feelings. Like, know how you want to feel. Like, what are those feelings?
Yeah. And you choose one at a time. Because I think this is, you know, how my own process really evolved. The super successful you process that I teach evolved because like, I want to feel lots of different things, preferably all at the same time within the space of one day, you know, like I want to feel inspired, and I want to feel loved, and I want to feel important. Like there's loads of things, calm and at peace and joyful and abundant and all sorts of other things, right? So then what do you do with that? The way you create a quantum shift, a quantum leap, is by addressing the small things. So you take a step at a time. You take one of those alignment focuses at a time, work on them one at a time, and you'll see before you know it that your life is changing as you start stepping into a totally different energy.
I think for me, one thing that really helped me with that was earlier this year when I had a session with Fabeku. I did his superpower session, and we drilled that down to what I hadn't realized, but now I can see it in so many areas of my life, is that the thing that I'm chasing and the thing that I help people with is finding and experiencing expansive joy. And that was the feeling that I got when I would do a long distance trail. That was the feeling I got from the house in Avebury. That's the feeling I get when I do so many things. It's expansive joy. And so having that word now helps me to like tap into that feeling.
Yeah. So sometimes it's a word. Sometimes it's like one of my soul spacers has an image of a ballerina. And it's not that she's going to take up ballet, right? It's just that image kind of encapsulates like what she wants to experience, that grace, that commitment, that strength, that beauty.
Yeah.
And she got that image from her subconscious, like during one of the processes that we did, because sometimes we tend to overthink these things. And of course, when you come at it with the conscious mind, everybody just wants more money, more success. It always boils down to the same things.
Yeah.
So how do you take that for yourself, and how do you actually come up with that image or that word that will really spark something in you personally? Because it's so subjective.
Yeah. For me, I made a screensaver for my computer with images that trigger that feeling for me, and that really helped me to tap into that feeling.
Well, there you go. You just asked me, how do you remember to your focus? And you have the tools, right?
Yeah. Yes, I have the tools to remember my focus on expansive joy, but I don't, or I probably have the tools, but I'm not using the tools to remind myself that it's okay to not be busy all the time.
But if you have the tools, if you have an expansive joy screensaver, I mean, does working through 1,000 emails in 10 minutes make you feel expansive joy?
No.
Right?
Makes me feel proud of myself for being productive, which is not my core desired feeling.
Right. So that's the thing. Like, so then it's a choice. Like, one of the things that I have to unravel, well, I had to unravel with myself, and I have to unravel with people I work with, is that willingness aspect. Like, you have to be willing to do it a different way. You have to be willing to feel good. And people think they don't deserve to feel good because they haven't achieved all these things. They think that allowing themselves to feel good is self-indulgent or lazy or whatever else they're judging as negative, right? And so you have to unravel these things first, because you're not going to even notice your screensaver until you unravel all those bits underneath, right?
Yeah, yeah. So we're surrounded by this Protestant work ethic of hard work and working, got a hard life, and it's like, gotta hustle. Hustle is such like a word for this world that we live in. And it's seen as a good thing by most people, I think. So how do we disengage from that?
It's a choice. People see it as a good thing, but people also see it as necessary. So the first place to start is, do you think you can have what you want without hustle? Like, really deeply, like, sit yourself down with a journal and write about it. Like, answer this question, like, from the depths of your soul, because the first answer that comes to you might not be the one that's actually in there. Is it possible to create something without hustle? I don't think it's possible to create something without work. Like, this is a whole conversation about, we all got, I think, a little bit on the internet caught up in this idea of ease and effortless.
Yeah.
But as I've heard said so many times, like, it's not effort none, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's like some effort is required. You can't just sit there and expect everything to come to you. Some action is required. I think what actually in the physical space, you need to take some action to put things into motion. So there is some effort, right? So what point does effort become hustle? That's also something to explore for yourself, right? What's the difference for you? Because I don't think anybody minds working hard for something that they really believe in.
Or something that they enjoy. Like for me, like I can do a workation and sit down and crank out a few thousand words of a book, and it's absolutely joyful for me.
Right.
But it is work.
Yeah, it is. So what do you consider effort and what do you consider hustle? Like, those are two very different energies.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually worth it to put in effort. Like, it's gratifying to put in effort towards something that's beautiful and brings you joy.
Yeah.
that's not the same as hustle energy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think like, all these words get mixed up for people and they end up saying like, oh, I'm against hustle, but then they hustle.
Yeah. Because they don't know, they don't have other role models. Like, there are very few people like Denise who are willing to say, like, I have an easy life. Like, she works, obviously. She didn't just sit on her ass and get where she is today. But she's willing to say, I'm not a busy mom.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like, I was telling you the story of, I was talking to my mom who had gotten into this conversation with one of my aunts, and they were basically trying to like trump the other one, like who had the harder life. Yeah. And she was telling me this story, and I said, why are you arguing about this? Like, why do you want to be the one who has the hardest life? Yeah. I said, I'm going to say that I have the easiest life, and none of you can beat me.
But how did they respond to that? Were they like, oh, that's just crazy, Joanna?
It's a bit of a shock. Like, nobody's ever said that to them. Like, we're so unwilling to admit that our life is good, to go up to someone and say, my life is really good. Like, I'm finding it really easy to do this. Because that's not what other people value. People value struggle. Like, even when you think about like stories that kind of make it through the ages, right? It's that hero's journey. There's a struggle in there. Like when you think about movies and the movie arc, the storytelling arc, like there needs to be some kind of struggle, like either internal or external. You're fighting against something. It's hard. And in the end, even though it's hard, you win.
Yeah. It's like those rags to riches stories that you get online with online entrepreneurs. Like, I was on welfare. I had nothing. My kids were going to be taken away. And then I discovered the power of webinars, Instagram, Facebook groups, like whatever. Insert magic. And then all of a sudden now I'm a multimillionaire.
And that's what people want, right? Yeah. When you tell a story of like, I was pretty well off and now I'm better well off and my life is pretty easy. Yeah. It doesn't have the same oomph to it.
It doesn't. And that's so interesting that you say that, because Kate Northrup wrote that book, Money, a Love Story. And I've seen, like, I remember going on to review that book because I read it and I liked it and I found it really useful. But a lot of the reviews were like, this woman didn't have it that hard. Like, her mom's a famous author. Like, yes, she got into bad debt and she had to get herself out of it, but really her life wasn't that bad. And I was just like, but why does that invalidate her story? Like, her story was still useful. Like, you don't have to be like homeless to make your story useful.
Yeah. Or to like have the justification for like achieving something and feeling proud of yourself.
Exactly.
So it's like, right?
Yeah.
So like those people are saying like, who is she saying that she achieved something when clearly she didn't, because it wasn't good enough because she already had such a high starting point.
Exactly. All she had was credit card debt. It's not like she was starving. But she had like tens of thousands of credit card debt, you know?
Yes, like I think it's just interesting to notice that in us as well, like when we're impressed by that transformation, right? We're also like expecting that kind of transformation from ourselves. I mean, we all have, we all have our stories. Most of us have had some horrible things happen and we all have that stuff. But that doesn't mean that we're more or less worthy.
Why do you think it's so hard for us to say that it's not hard for us? And like, as I'm asking this question, I'm thinking like, I recognize the fact that like, had it hard, like now I'm in a really good spot in life. Like, I haven't achieved all the things I want to achieve. Like, I don't have all the things I want to have, blah, 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 but I'm in a pretty good spot. Why do you think it's so hard for us to say this? And I'm saying like, I'm in a pretty good spot, but like, honestly, things are pretty good. And it's so fucking hard for me to say that.
Why?
Because I feel like I don't want to trigger people's shit.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to trigger people who are out there having a shitty time and thinking, oh, look at her and her fucking good life. Like,
it seems unfair, right?
Yeah.
Like, we both have Asperger's. So that fairness is really important to both of us. Maybe that's why it's like, maybe we're having this conversation and why it's so hard. I'm really, really conscious of that. Like, it's almost like it's not fair that my life is so good and your life sucks.
But also, I've worked to get where I am. Like,
but see, you're putting the work
yes,
back.
I know.
And I'm not judging you.
No, I know. But thank you for pointing it out, because I think that's important, because I feel like I have to.
But I know, because I said that to you, but what was in my own head was I worked really hard to get where I am.
Yeah, you did.
And I know that. And so that justifies it. And
but if we hadn't worked hard and we had just been given what we've got, how would that be different? Like, the world's not going to fall apart. Like, some people do get like trust funds and like inheritances and win the lottery. Like, they don't do much. They just exist or buy a lottery ticket and then get stuff given to them. Like, is that so bad?
Oh my God, like I have so much judgment in my head right now.
Okay, good. So,
So definitely something there for me to look at.
and if you're listening to this and you have so much judgment, look at that. I mean, like, really, it depends. Like, you can get that trust fund, you can get that inheritance, and you can do awesome shit with it and like, not save the world, but, like, make the world a better place, or you can just, buy yourself 75 Mercedes and, like, drive around in a new car every day of the week.
Which is wrong, right?
Well, I mean, how wrong is it? Like, I mean,
Well,
like that sounds so indulgent, but like, is it hurting the world? Like, you're giving all the Mercedes car people, like, jobs. I don't know.
we're starting to get a little bit, both of us, ranty, I think. It's an emotional thing. Like, I don't know, like top of my head, I think it is wrong because I think there's better things you can do with that money.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Than buy 75 Mercedes. But I mean, that's not to say that you can't like do something for yourself either. But I think that's a total, maybe we need to do
I think that's probably like a whole different theme.
Yeah. So how do you give yourself permission to be unbusy? Like, how do you, like, it's not just to rest, right? Because again, like, we're living in a world of duality. And so we have this tendency to make things either or and very opposite to each other. So either you're working or you're resting, right? Either you're being productive or you're being lazy.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, that's really hard. And I just went through that because I had a really busy month and a half with like a ton of stuff, which I've already talked about on my podcast 1,000 times. And like everyone on my mailing list knows it. Like I was super busy. I was so busy and I don't like being busy. So it was really stressful. I mean, it was all good stuff. That's the thing. It was like such good stuff, but it like was all crammed into a month and a half and it was really hard. So I came out of that. And there was a week where I was like, this is the date where I'm going to get back on track and I'm going to get my routine back and I'm going to do stuff. And then I got to that week, I just crashed. I had no energy. Like I did some stuff, but I had to give myself permission, just sit in bed and read a book, to not do all the stuff because I couldn't focus on getting stuff done.
And that's not, that in itself is fine, but I think what's not fine is that you're really judging that. Like
I felt so guilty. Like I knew, like I gave myself permission to rest. I gave myself permission to not be busy. I gave myself permission to read a book. But the whole time I felt guilty about it. And that's the problem.
Yeah, so it's like you feel like you shouldn't have been doing that, like which kind of negates the whole like the positive energy coming from giving yourself that space, right?
Yeah.
I think it becomes easier with time. I also think that like it becomes easier when you do it more regularly. Like,
yeah, it's like building a muscle.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Like I find like when I first started kind of really being conscious of giving myself space and what I needed, I would watch like 2 hours of television in the middle of the day with everything else that I have to be doing. Mm-hmm. I thought that was insane. I was just like, oh my God, like, but I was like, but this is clearly what I need. That really like, that was exactly what I wanted to do. I thought, okay, this is going to be forever. And it wasn't. Like, I haven't watched TV during the day probably in about 3 years now.
Yeah.
I thought this was going to be my thing. And it totally was not, But like, I make sure that I read a bit of my book every day. Like, even if it's for just 10 minutes, I make sure that I get outside most days. Right? So it makes it a lot easier to give yourself that space if you kind of build it into your day.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And give yourself reminders. Because like, for example, an example of what not to do. So I used to eat 3 meals a day like normal people. And so I would always block out my meals in my calendar. And I would have an hour blocked out for lunch every day. And it was my rest. And I would like make a nice salad. And I would like, it was a really good break from the day. But since I started doing intermittent fasting and I no longer eat breakfast and lunch, I deleted those meals from my calendar. And now I don't take a break in the middle of the day. And so I think that's another reason why I get to the end of the day. I have an extra hour in my work day because I didn't have lunch. And I'm burnt out a lot of days.
Yeah. So you really need to, I think, like spend some time envisioning what your life looks like the way you want it. And I think it's that basic work on what does success actually look like for you? Like when you've arrived, what do things look like? And then align with that, right? Yeah. And that's exactly what I've done with myself. And that's exactly what I take people through. In my opinion, it's the only way. Like, I don't usually like to say it's the only way, but in this case, I think it's the only way. I don't think there's a quick fix. I do think that we need to keep making different choices and taking different sorts of action. Otherwise, we're just going to get the same of what we currently have.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are some different, like there needs to be some progress and some stuff going on, right? But at the same time, I don't think we can achieve anything that really matters unless we learn to enjoy the journey.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. However, like one of the things that I fear, I think, and I think why it's so hard for me to give myself guilt-free, unbusy weeks or days, is that I think I'm afraid, like you said, that when you were watching TV every day for a couple of hours, that you thought that was going to be the thing. Like, I think I'm afraid I'm just going to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to have a restful week. I'm going to not be busy this week. And then I'm just going to like slide down into this abyss of just nothingness and like not doing anything and being super lazy.
I don't think that's possible.
I agree. Like logically, like I know that's not going to happen because I can't function that way. Like I wouldn't be able to survive. But like, I think that's the fear in the back of my mind. And that's the voice that gives me the guilt to keep me on track with being busy so that I don't be like lazy forever.
So in my experience, and I've given myself loads of space to be lazy. In my experience, like I got to a point where I was pretty rested and I was pretty relaxed about things, and it was time to start having goals again. So I went through a whole period where I didn't even set goals. I just kind of went with the flow and did this, a bit of this, bit of that. And I wasn't very driven, even though that's my personality. But I mean, I've been driven for 40 years. Like sometimes you just need a break, right? So like there was a moment where I thought to myself, okay, I think I need to be a bit harsher sometimes, because it's almost like I remember my guide saying to me, like, you've now learned to give yourself space, but don't use it as an excuse not to do the stuff that makes you uncomfortable. Right? So after you learn to give yourself space and permission, guilt-free, all that stuff, like you need to learn that discernment between when time off or unbusy time is like what you need versus like you're just making excuses because there's something that you're resisting, something that's uncomfortable that you know will bring you to the next level and you don't want to do it, so you're not doing it. Then that's an opportunity to get to know yourself and that line and where it lies for you a little bit better.
Okay, so how do you tell the difference?
Intuitively. And again, like it's a muscle. Sometimes I can really feel, and sometimes I think it can be misleading as well, because we're very good at tricking ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you know when you need to like push yourself a little?
When I see that no progress is being made.
Okay.
Right? Because like everybody else who's listening to this podcast, I also want something different from my life. Like my life is very good and I want some different things. I want to experience some different things, right? And when I see that nothing is happening because I'm doing my puzzle all the time. Like
you're achieving lots of puzzles though. You're solving lots of puzzles. You got
But you can feel when enough is enough. Like you can actually feel that switch to, okay, like now I have the mental space to tackle this. It comes with being intentional about your life, being super aware about what's happening, and which you are. And I think a lot of our listeners aim to be, right? Like to be really like aware and conscious of why they're making certain choices and what things are happening and what beliefs are coming up, all that kind of stuff, right? And it just comes with that, and you just get better and better. And honestly, you're not going to spend 3 years doing puzzles, right? Like maybe you'll spend 3 days and then be like, okay, I've spent 3 days on this now. Like, do I need to start a new one or do I need to do some work?
Yeah,
you know, like, and it's kind of then a natural choice to say, I'd quite like to do the puzzle because it's easier.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is actually a really important thing. Like, it's not a trick. It's just how I frame things. Is the concept of choice, right? So sometimes I feel like what I really want to do is do puzzle or keep reading my book or whatever it is. But what I choose to do is to tackle this thing that I've been resisting because I know that that's what's actually aligned with the version of me that I want to become and the reality that I want to experience.
Right.
So eventually you're going to choose for either staying in place.
Yeah.
Or the next thing, right? Or your next level. There's no shaming here. Like, it's totally okay to choose for where you are. Like, everybody has days where you're like, actually, you know, like I have zero interest in moving forward today. Like, I just want to read my book. You know, like, and that's perfectly okay. And you can do that for your entire life. Like, we put such pressure on ourselves to create more, to create something different, etc. If you're happy with what you have,
you're good.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You're good. Great. Well done. But if you're happy and you would also love to have either something more or something different, then make sure you're choosing for that.
Yeah.
And that's the alignment stuff, right? That's where we choose to feel proud of ourselves, even though we haven't achieved what we want to achieve, because we know that that ultimate highest potential version of us feels proud. And so that's what we're choosing for.
It's all a balance.
Yes. Of like knowing where you're going.
Yeah.
So having a vision, having goals, but also I think even more importantly, allowing yourself to enjoy the journey. Because again, the journey isn't like random thing. The journey is your life. A lot of the times when we achieve the ultimate end, it's actually going to be pretty ultimate.
Yeah.
So like, let's not rush towards that. No?
Yes. I mean, obviously we never know when we're going to die, but let's assume we're going to live long lives, because otherwise, how do you live your life? But yeah, why would we rush towards that? Unless we are in a bad place and we want to rush towards that, in which case
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing though, because we say all these sayings in the journey and this and that, but like when you stop and think about it, it's your life. Your everyday life is the actual journey. So if you have a choice, which you do, why would you not choose to enjoy that? Like that makes absolutely no sense. Of course you're going to enjoy the journey.
Yeah. Although, like, as you say that, like, people come to mind who are just absolutely miserable and seem to enjoy being miserable.
Well, because those people haven't yet realized that they have a choice, and that's part of personal development and all that stuff, right? Which our listeners are into.
Exactly,
so they will take that. I mean, there is a choice there. You can be happy or you can be miserable in all sorts of situations, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you don't have to have everything perfect in order to be.
Indeed.
All right.
That's a good place to end on, right? You don't have achieved everything on your list in order to feel good about yourself and to be happy.
Yeah, you can feel happy today. All right. So thank you for this, and I look forward to our next one.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.